Let's stay with Colorado for a second and talk about Shedeur Sanders, because to me, he was the best quarterback sort of left in the college football landscape last year, but people seem to be very divided on him. And I want to preface it by saying, like, I don't like the sort of Deion Sanders hoopla, the hype, the bullshit that surrounds him. Like, it's annoying, right? So I went into Shedeur Sanders' tape wanting to dislike it, right? Wanting to just think that this guy was, a product of nepotism and, more hype than substance. But, man, I thought he was really, really good. And the offensive line around him stank. Like, I think a lot of his problems were a product of other things, not him. How good is Shedeur Sanders? I think he has the highest, whatever we're calling these college football EA grades, numbers. He's the highest graded, essentially, quarterback in the nation. People are projecting him as the number one overall pick. Because of that, like, should he be the top quarterback? How high should he be ranked?
I think he's certainly, for me right now, I would have him QB1. I really like his game too. And honestly, I look at it, you have to look at him in a clean pocket, right? And there are times when, yes, he's responsible for his own sacks and pressures, but he had the third best clean pocket passing grade last year behind Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, the first two picks in the draft. And it makes almost no sense that he's as good as he is and he played as well as he did, and Colorado only won 4 games. Like, quarterbacks with 90 grades don't win 4 games, and that just shows you them in the trenches on both sides of the ball, and that's really all they focused on this offseason. They overhauled the entire offensive line again. They overhauled their defensive front so they could stop the run better, which is a premium in the Big 12 this year. There's a boatload of good running games in the Big 12. But as far as Sanders goes, when he's clean and he has a chance to operate, I'm so impressed by his football IQ. Like, you could see in that very first game against TCU, his recognition of coverages, I think, is better than any college quarterback right now. I think you can see the pedigree. You can see what he came up with, obviously, under Deion Sanders. He should know football really well coming up under Deion. But that's what it is for me. I think he's got like a B-plus arm. He's probably got B to B-plus mobility, where he's going to improvise more so to pass, but he can pick up first downs. But I think from the neck up, he's as good as any quarterback, if not the best in the country right now. And they just have the problem of last year giving up pressure on almost 37% of his dropbacks. If that number were to get somewhere close or under 30, he's probably in Heisman contention, and Colorado might be in Big 12 contention. He just needs space to operate. He's a little smaller. He's around 6'1". He is a pocket quarterback who can move a little bit, but his football IQ is what does it for me. He very quickly recognizes coverages and knows what to exploit.
Did Colorado do a good enough job of rebuilding the problem areas around him? I know that was the focus in the offseason. There's a ton of turnover with that program. Every single offseason seems to be the way they operate. Have they successfully rebuilt the problem areas?
I think it's still a question mark. You're going to get they got the top tackle recruit in the country, Jordan Seaton, to play left tackle. They got some other decent players across the rest of the offensive line. I think it's going to be more of that creep back towards average thing that we always talk about with offensive lines and pass protection, right? They didn't get any superstars unless Seaton is the superstar at left tackle, is a true freshman. I think as far as, what's going to help them too is defensively, if they can get better at stopping the run. I think they did do a better job with that, getting guys like B.J. Green and Jalen Wester in their front seven. That'll help when it comes to just not getting whipped in the trenches on both sides of the ball, and maybe creating some easier drives for them, because their run defense was just bad last year. But it's still a question mark. We're going to have to see it in their opening games. I believe it's week 2. They play Nebraska again, who's got a big front seven. If they do a better job blocking a team like a Nebraska, or as we get into the Big 12, there's actually not that many great pass rushing teams in the Big 12 either. So it remains to be seen. I can't sit here and tell you they went in the portal and got superstars. They got quantity over quality. They're replacing all 5 guys in their offensive line. And the name to watch will be the true freshman at left tackle, Jordan Seaton, who was the top recruit in the country.
And then the other option as the top quarterback in the draft by most people is Carson Beck, the Georgia quarterback, right? Talk to me about him. How likely is he to be the top overall quarterback?
I think it's pretty likely, because he's got such a high floor, right? Like, he's actually the cleanest projection out of any quarterback, right? Coming in last year for a 2-time champ in Stetson Bennett, And having the type of year he had should not be lost on anybody. Carson Beck was spectacular, and I was most impressed with him in the 2 games that Brock Bowers was actually out with an ankle injury, and he just stepped his game up and tore, I believe it was Kentucky and Tennessee, to shreds. But he's much more, if he's going to be a top 5 pick or even a number 1 overall pick, it's not going, you're not going to think of him the same way as you did a Trevor Lawrence or a Caleb Williams, right? His style is much more in the vein of a Kirk Cousins or a Jared Goff, where he makes wicked quick decisions from the pocket. He had the fastest time to throw in the country, a 92.4 clean pocket passing grade, pretty much top 10 in almost every metric in grading that we have. He just makes quick decisions. He makes the right decisions. He's extremely accurate. When the only thing he doesn't really do much is improvise, right? When he's moved off his spot, I believe his grade was in the 30s, but a true pocket quarterback that I think the more and more I watch him, I could see a Jared Goff type of comparison. You're talking about a guy who makes quick decisions, wants to get his pre-snap read going and fire the ball out, especially over the middle of the field. He's the easiest guy to project as like just having a really good stat line and production this year. Top 5 Heisman probably if he has a similar year to what he did last year. You know what you're getting. The question with Beck for me when it comes to the NFL is kind of like Jared Goff, where we're like, well, you're pretty clearly top 12, but is there anything in you that makes you top 5, right? And I think if you're a team like even like the Raiders, right, where you just need like a stable, like something, I guess that's the word, is stability, right? If you need stability at the position, Carson Beck is definitely your guy, because I think he's almost as easy to project at any position as any guy in this draft. It's just it's a clean profile. It's like obvious what he is.
Yeah, my question would be, does he make enough sort of big plays, which is number one, I think it's a string you need to have to your bow in the NFL, but it's also a thing I think that's skewing more and more important as defenses get better and better at shutting down those explosive plays. Like that was the criticism of Bo Nix last season, and Bo Nix had a slightly higher big-time throw rate than Carson Beck. Both are in and around 4%. But Bo Nix also made dramatically fewer mistakes, turnover-worthy plays than Beck did. Like Bo Nix, at the very minimum, was like, okay, you are never going to make a mistake. And then our question is, do you make enough big plays? Beck, I mean, his turnover-worthy play rate is good, but it wasn't stupidly good like Bo Nix. So, that's the question with guys like Jared Goff, right? It's like, do you make those special plays, or do you make enough of them for us to rank you that highly?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think the big time throw rate was like average or maybe even a little bit below average. And Georgia's, I think, other than Bowers last year, I think Georgia's receiving core wasn't the greatest. I know they had some good players, Rosemary Jackson, Dominic Lovett, who's coming back this year. But I don't think they had as explosive a receiving core as they've had in some past years too. So the entire thing kind of conspire to just be like, okay, we're going to ride our defense, so we're going to be a little more conservative. And I think the comparison to Knicks, the only part for that for me is that was Beck's first year starting, right? And it was Bo Nix's 6th, right? So I think Beck, there is some elements where you go, okay, for a first year starting, that's about as good as it can get, especially in the pressure cooker of Georgia. And they only lost 1 game, right, to Alabama, who just kind of straight up beat them, right? No, I agree with you. That's the big thing is like, where is the ceiling here? Are you just a solid guaranteed B+ quarterback, or do you make enough A plays? And this is going to apply to Georgia during this season too. He's without Brock Bowers. He's going to have to create more and make more big throws for a receiving core that is solid, but it doesn't have like some of these other teams have a Luther Burden or a Tetsuo McMillan or Travis Hunter. Like Georgia doesn't have a guy like that at wide receiver. Oscar Delp is a good tight end. He's not as good as Brock Bowers. I know he'll get some draft love later, but Beck really has to be now the engine of this offense as opposed to Bowers and a lot of the after the catch stuff. If he can do that, he could find himself, he might be, who knows, the New York Giants next quarterback, the Raiders next quarterback, whoever in the top 5 or 10 of the draft. But you're right. I mean, we need to see the ceiling, and Georgia's going to need to see that ceiling if they want to win a national title again.